Darkness swallowed the horizon as two figures moved in absolute silence across a barren, wind-blasted plain. The air, thick with damp chill, bit at exposed skin and whispered its hostility, as if nature itself had turned against them. Not that they were unaccustomed to such reception. Their footfalls made no sound, not a single crunch of gravel or rustle of brush. They moved like phantoms, honed by years of experience into ghosts of war. Their suits, matte black, contour-hugging, merged with the night, designed to vanish in shadow. Faces hidden behind masks and mirrored visors, they reflected only the faintest shimmer of starlight. These weren't just soldiers. They were specialists, elite operatives whose existence was buried beneath layers of secrecy. To the outside world, they had no names, no identities, just call signs, encryption codes, silence. Max led, always did. His eyes, cold and analytical, scanned the terrain ahead, measuring every bump and ridge with a hunter's instinct. Behind him, Alex swept the rear, ears tuned for even the subtlest hint of danger. Together, they moved like one organism, a fluid blend of muscle, mind, and machine, trained to survive where others faltered. They'd come a long way, across wastelands that weren't marked on any map, over territories that officially didn't exist. Their orders had arrived less than 24 hours ago. Reach a set of coordinates, infiltrate a zone designated Site 57, eliminate the target. No details, no names, just numbers. And a clear directive, complete the mission at any cost. Time passed slowly. Then Max halted. Before them, the earth dipped into a massive crater surrounded by jagged cliffs and twisted rock, like something ripped from the pages of a geological apocalypse. According to the map on Max's wrist display, the center of this natural scar was their destination, Site 57. Max gestured. Alex dropped to one knee and raised his long-range scope. Through the glass, what first looked like an abandoned research outpost revealed subtle signs of recent activity. Cleared pathways in the dust, heat signatures faint but present, and a low electromagnetic pulse, steady and unmistakable. Something was alive down there. Max crouched, fingers dancing across the display of his tactical tablet. The coordinates matched, but a quiet unease crept in. This didn't feel right. Usually, even black ops like theirs came with some context. This time, just blind entry into the unknown. He gave the signal. No words, no need. They descended the cliffside on a narrow, crumbling path. Weapons drawn, senses electric. Every step brought them closer to a place the world had deliberately forgotten, or perhaps tried to. As they neared the structure, Alex stopped. His gear detected a pulse, not power grid level, but something else, rhythmic, organic even. Max rerouted the approach. This needed eyes on. Stealth became paramount. They split, moving into flanking positions. Shadows melted around them. Their rifles, calibrated for micro-adjustments, felt like extensions of their very arms. Then Max found a gap, a door half opened by the wind. No movement, no noise. He slipped inside. Darkness. The air inside the complex felt dense, thick with a metallic scent and something else. Something wrong. They pushed forward into silence, the kind of silence that screams. Every inch of wall was coated in dust, and a strange, oily film that clung to gloves and wouldn't wash off easily. The hallways were narrow, cramped, with doors sealed tight under slabs of reinforced steel. Something was watching. Not physically, not yet. But every nerve screamed it. The hum came next, soft at first, then unmistakable. Machinery, active. Somewhere deep in the structure, a heartbeat of power still pulsed. Max and Alex exchanged glances, not fear, Acknowledgement. This was no ghost station. Someone had been here. Maybe still was. They followed the hum through branching corridors, finally reaching a wide steel door. Markings on the wall had long faded, but faint lettering still warned in broken English and Cyrillic, "Restricted, Level 4. Max scanned the lock, live, running on backup power. Bypassing it without setting off alarms would be delicate. Alex watched his back, scanning the dead hallway for the not-so-dead. The lock gave way, the door opened to a completely different world. Inside, the complex was pristine. Clean walls, LED ceiling lights humming softly, not a speck of dust. Screens glowed gently along the walls, streaming data. This place wasn't just functional, it was operational. Someone was definitely here. Max spotted a control panel, a system map. It showed the layout of the entire facility, and one room stood out in flashing red, a sealed chamber marked simply with the code C0. That was their destination. He disabled a security subloop, giving them temporary blind spots in the surveillance grid. Time was short. Every second they lingered risked exposure. But they had no choice. The mission, and perhaps far more, depended on what was behind that red-marked door. Then came the noise. Soft, barely audible, a whisper or a breath. It came from behind them. They froze. Alex raised his rifle, eyes locked on the corridor they'd come from. Nothing. Just that same unnatural silence. Only now, heavier, like the very air held its breath. The corridor pulsed again. Max and Alex pressed forward. No hesitation, just instinct. Behind them, the whisper returned, closer. They reached the final door. Plain, unassuming, but behind it, the truth. Max pushed it open and stepped into light, blinding. Their eyes adjusted slowly. What lay before them was no mere room. It was a lab, but unlike any they'd seen. Towering screens surrounded a massive chamber. At its center, a glass containment capsule hovered silently, suspended by invisible force. Inside, something. A translucent orb, rotating slowly, glowing with soft alien luminescence. It pulsed, the same rhythm they'd felt from the moment they entered the crater. Now stronger, now real. Max approached. The air thickened. Every breath heavier. Each step felt like wading through water. Alex held position at the door, rifle ready, but his eyes were fixed on the orb. On the screens around them, data scrolled by in languages and symbols they didn't recognize. Bio readings, energy outputs. Some numbers didn't even make sense, exponential figures beyond what should be physically possible. Then the alarm tripped. Max looked up. One word flashed across every screen, detected. They were no longer alone. An alarm without sound. A crimson pulse that danced across every panel, every monitor, and every inch of light in the chamber. The silence wasn't empty. It was filled with urgency, a frequency that spoke directly to the instincts of men trained to read death before it arrived. Alex didn't wait. He was already at the threshold, rifle raised, sight sweeping the corridor they came through. Max, a few paces behind, ripped a hard drive from the terminal, a reflexive act born of experience. When retreat becomes survival, data is the only proof your mission mattered. Then the first footstep echoed. Heavy. Boots on steel. The kind of rhythm that comes from discipline and armor. They were coming. Max and Alex weren't just compromised. They were trapped. Alex opened fire the moment the first silhouette appeared in the hall. A clean shot. The figure collapsed, a dull thud muffled by body armor and silence. But behind him came more. Not chaos, precision. These weren't rent-a-guns or panic fire squads. These were professionals. Just like them, just like they used to be. Max tossed a smoke grenade. The lab vanished in a cloud of synthetic fog. Visibility dropped to 0. It was enough. They moved as one, Max flanking left, Alex sweeping right. No words, just practiced motion, the language of survivors. Through thermal optics, red ghosts flickered and moved in formation. Alex picked off 3 before they breached the lab's threshold. Max created a crossfire, trapping the invaders between the unknown energy source and their own hesitation. But there were too many, and the air was changing. The orb pulsed faster now, brighter, reacting not to the fighting, but to them, as if it knew, as if it watched. Max glanced at the capsule. For a split second he saw something, a shape inside the orb, a silhouette, human, but wrong. Limbs too smooth, head cocked unnaturally to one side. He blinked, gone. No time. "Push right," Max barked, the first word spoken in hours, and Alex immediately angled toward a service hatch partially hidden in the wall. Max covered the exit, tossing one last grenade, the explosion flattening 2 pursuers and tearing into the control panel beside the capsule. The orb screamed. Not a sound, not exactly. A pressure. A low, bone-deep vibration that made their eyes water and teeth grind. A frequency they could feel in their spines. They ran. The service corridor was narrow, low-ceilinged, and barely wide enough for gear. Water dripped from somewhere overhead. Lights flickered. Behind them, the echo of boots. Too many, too close. Ahead, darkness and uncertainty. But they'd been here before. Not here, but places like it. When the world collapses behind you, there's only forward. Max keyed open a side panel, an old lift system, likely decommissioned. No time to think. They piled in, slammed the door, and hit the lowest floor available. The descent was fast, jarring. The old machinery groaned like it hadn't moved in decades. As they dropped, the pulse from above faded. But something else took its place. Colder. Older. The lift stopped. What greeted them wasn't another corridor or control room. It was stone, raw earth, unfinished rock walls. This wasn't part of the original design. This place wasn't meant to be found. Their rifles came up instinctively. As they stepped out, the temperature plummeted. Breath steamed in the low light of their visors. The air felt stale, untouched for decades, maybe longer. Yet still, somehow, it pulsed. Like a heartbeat beneath stone. Ahead, a tunnel. Crude, carved by hand. No, something else, something ancient. They advanced slowly, scanning every inch. Symbols began to appear along the walls, etched into the stone, glowing faintly with phosphorescence. Not paint, not wire, just energy, language, in a form the human mind refused to fully process. Then Alex stopped. He motioned to the ground. Footprints, recent. Max knelt. Tread patterns, military, gear weight, at least 5, maybe more. Not the same squad from above. These were already down here. "Who the hell else knows?" Alex whispered. Max didn't answer, because deep down he already knew the answer. The ones funding this, the ones hiding it. They hadn't lost control of the site. They owned it. What Max and Alex had walked into wasn't a breach. It was a test. And they'd passed the first phase. Just ahead, the tunnel widened into a chamber. It was circular, with a domed ceiling of smooth obsidian-like material. At the center stood a monolithic structure. Stone, metal, or both. Impossible to tell. It glowed with the same hue as the orb above. But dimmer, dormant. Alex approached carefully, rifle trained. Max studied the markings, more of those impossible symbols, now forming circles within circles. A soft vibration began, then lights flared. A motion sensor? No, this place had no tech. The vibration intensified. Lights, from nowhere, cast moving shadows. A low sound, like whispered voices beneath water, began to swell in the room. Then the monolith opened. A seam split down its center, revealing something inside. A human body, or what used to be one. Suspended in a vertical cradle, breathing shallowly, eyes closed. Tubes, not plastic, not organic, fed into its skin. Symbols glowed along the flesh. Some were burned in, others moved. Max stepped forward. It was him. No, not him. But the resemblance was unmistakable. Same jaw, same scar over the left brow, same face. Alex stepped back instinctively, rifle trembling for the first time. Then, slowly, the body in the cradle opened its eyes. Pale, milky, empty, but focused. On Max. The room whispered louder now, forming syllables not meant for ears, but for the spaces in between thoughts. Max stumbled backward. Alex raised his rifle again, ready to shoot. The voice spoke, not through the air, but through their minds, and it knew their names. The whisper became a presence. It crawled into their heads without force, without invitation, simply arriving, like a fog that seeps through cracks in old stone. It spoke no known language, and yet Max and Alex understood it. Not with ears, not with words, but with memory. Flashes of places they'd never been. Cities bathed in green fire. Stars falling across a broken sky. Children laughing underwater. Pain, glory, death. All colliding in bursts of sensation that short-circuited thought. And the message, when it came, was clear. You are the key. Max tried to pull away, gripping the strap of his rifle like an anchor. But the voice clung to him, not malevolent, not warm either, just inevitable. Like gravity, like time. Across the chamber, the figure that wore Max's face watched him. Not blinking, not breathing, not moving. Then, as if released, the tension snapped. Max gasped. Alex stumbled back, dragging in a ragged breath. The whispers stopped. Silence returned, but it was the silence after the storm. Not calm, but stunned quiet. Alex trained his rifle on the cradle. What the hell was that? Max didn't answer immediately. His mind reeled, not with confusion, but with terrifying clarity. He had seen something, someplace, and he knew. This was only the beginning. He took a step toward the cradle, hand shaking just enough to make the movement unnatural. The figure didn't react. Still, eyes open, watching. It wasn't breathing, not in the human way. Max felt a pressure behind his eyes, the same pulsing rhythm from before, now syncing with his heart. Then something new, a dull ache at the base of his skull. A memory not his. A name, Project Echo. The cradle's base lit up with faint glyphs, the same strange writing they'd seen in the tunnel. Alex took another step back. We need to leave. Max nodded, barely. They backed away together, rifles raised, eyes locked on the unmoving figure. Behind them, a door, curved, seamless, slid open into a corridor that hadn't existed moments before. The place was changing, or revealing itself. Max hesitated, then stepped through. Alex followed, muttering under his breath. This is how people die in horror movies. The corridor was warm. Too warm. Humidity clung to their faces. Somewhere deep inside the walls, something breathed. They moved fast now. No more stealth, just distance. Behind them, the hum began again. It wasn't mechanical, it was organic, as if the complex itself had a pulse. Max kept glancing at the hallway walls. They were slick with moisture. The lights were now soft and blue, like bioluminescent algae. Patterns danced faintly along the surfaces, living circuits, neural. The deeper they went, the more the hall narrowed, becoming something less like a corridor and more like a throat. Alex said what Max had been thinking. This place is alive. They burst into another chamber, and stopped. Dead center stood a man, not armed, not armored, wearing civilian clothes, torn, blood-stained, half-soaked in something black and reeking. His eyes were wide, not with fear but madness. He turned slowly. They raised weapons, trained, precise. But the man smiled. "I knew someone would come," he said, voice hoarse, eyes unfocused. Max didn't lower his rifle. "Who are you?" The man laughed. "I was part of it, the first wave. They told us it was containment, research, a breach, but it wasn't a breach." He looked directly at Max. "It was a birth." Alex stepped forward. What was born? The man smiled wider, then his body convulsed. Bones cracked, not just dislocating, reshaping. He screamed, or maybe it wasn't a scream. Maybe it was laughter turned inside out. His jaw elongated. Skin rippled as something beneath it tried to escape. Max shouted, "Contact! Move!" The man's skin split like wet fabric, and from it emerged something wrong. Tall, multi-limbed, humanoid only in outline, covered in the same glyphs that glowed from the walls. It looked like a man who had been rewritten, from the inside out. It moved fast, too fast. Alex fired first, 2 rounds to the chest. The thing stumbled but didn't fall. Max unleashed a full burst. Blood, or something like it, sprayed across the walls. The creature collapsed, twitching. Dead, they didn't wait. Moving quickly, Max scanned the walls for another exit. Behind them, the body twitched again. Max threw a thermal grenade. "Clear!" The explosion rocked the chamber. Fire licked the ceiling. Screeches, distant and deep, echoed through the complex. It had awakened something, or everything. They ran, through corridor after corridor, each one stranger than the last. The layout no longer made sense. Spirals where there should be straight lines, sloped ceilings, floors that pulsed when stepped on. Behind them, shapes moved in the shadows. Too many, too fast. The complex, or whatever lay beneath it, was no longer dormant. Max turned a corner and nearly slammed into a steel bulkhead, a massive vault door, old tech, human-made. "Cover me," he shouted. Alex planted feet, scanning behind. Max worked the control panel, locked, power offline. He grabbed the emergency manual override. Then the hum stopped. Silence. And then voices, not one, many, children, whispering, laughing, screaming. Alex turned pale. "I hear them." Max pulled the override. The door groaned open. They dove through, sealing it behind. Inside, darkness. Then lights. A security room, rows of monitors. Footage from the entire complex. Max scanned the feeds. One screen froze him in place. The lab, the orb, the figure still inside. Only now, it wasn't alone. Standing beside the capsule was a man, in uniform, with a face Max hadn't seen in years, a face he buried years ago. "Eric," he whispered. Alex looked up. "What?" Max turned. "He's alive." Eric Keller was dead. He had died 3 years ago in the belly of a collapsing facility half a world away, burned, buried, and erased. Max had carried the memory like a scar under the skin, too deep to show, too painful to forget. They had recovered nothing. No body, no gear, not even his tags. Just heat signatures gone cold, and the unspoken pact among survivors. Don't ask what really happened. Don't wonder who made the call. But there he was, standing beside the capsule like a sentinel, alive. Or something close to it. Max stared at the flickering screen. The footage jittered, as if the cameras couldn't fully process what they were seeing. Eric's face looked almost the same, the sharp lines, the focused eyes, but there was something wrong. His movements were too smooth, too deliberate, and his eyes, they shimmered faintly, reflecting the pulse of the orb like mirrors. Alex stepped closer, watching the same feed. That's impossible. Max didn't respond. His mind was already racing, rifling through fragmented memories and old reports, redacted files and whispered doubts. Eric had been the first to breach the vault in Coast Province, the first to see what lay beneath. And now, he was here. Max brought up the facility's system map. They were 3 levels below the lab. The quickest way up, an emergency access shaft 2 corridors to the north. But between here and there, dozens of life signs, too many. "We go quiet," Max said. Alex nodded. No argument, just steel. They prepped gear in silence, checked rounds, swapped optics, no backup, no evac, just the mission, whatever it was now. They moved. The halls above had changed again. Lights flickered erratically, casting long shadows where there should have been none. The floor seemed to flex beneath their boots, not yielding, not solid. Something in between. They passed rooms that weren't on the map. Rooms full of equipment that looked military, but modified. Organic interfaces. Biometric panels coded in symbols, not numbers. One room held racks of weapons that looked like they had grown rather than been manufactured. Another, cages. Empty now, but scratched, clawed. They didn't speak, they didn't stop. The first contact came at the stairwell. A team, 5 operators, helmets down, gear clean, moving too fast, too quiet. Max held up a fist. "Stop." Alex ducked into cover. Then one of the operators turned and looked directly at them. No hesitation, no alarm, just eye contact and a smile. Max blinked. The smile was still there, but wrong, too wide, too even. Then the team moved on, without engaging, without a sound. Alex whispered, "What the hell is going on?" "I don't think they're human," Max said flatly. They pushed on. At the shaft access, the doorway had been sealed with a web of biomechanical growth. Pulsing tissue wrapped around the frame like roots. Max stared at it, then drew his knife. The blade sliced. The wall screamed. Not sound, pressure, in the skull. Alex doubled over, clutching his head. Max grit his teeth and cut faster. The material writhed, twitching as it bled a thick, black fluid that evaporated on contact. Then the shaft door snapped open. They climbed. Every rung felt heavier, the air thinner, like something didn't want them going up. Halfway, the vibrations began again, a rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat. Max reached the top first, pried the access panel, and rolled out into the lab's sub-level. Alex followed, and there he was, Eric, standing by the capsule, hand resting on the glass. He turned, slowly, like he'd been waiting. Max raised his rifle. Eric smiled. "Max." The voice was his, but layered, something underneath it like an echo that wasn't in the room. Alex aimed. "Don't move." Eric didn't. He looked at Max. "You came." His voice was soft, warm, like nothing had changed, like 3 years hadn't passed, like he hadn't died screaming into static. "What is this?" Max asked. "What happened to you?" Eric looked down at the orb. "It chose me." The pulse from the capsule intensified. Behind the glass, the object spun faster. "What does that mean?" Alex snapped. Eric looked back at Max. "You always wanted to understand. You asked what comes next after death, after war, after purpose." He stepped forward. Neither Max nor Alex fired. "I've seen it," Eric said. "I've seen beyond." Max stepped forward, just enough to see his face better. There were cracks in his skin, faint lines of light beneath the surface, like he wasn't made of flesh anymore, but something wearing it. Alex whispered, "He's gone." Eric smiled sadly. "No, I'm becoming." Then the alarms blared. Real ones. Metal, machinery. The facility reacted violently. Screens turned red. Lockdown warnings cascaded across displays. And the orb, it stopped spinning. It rose, out of the cradle, hovering, glowing, alive, and then it spoke. But not in words. It projected itself into every screen, every light, every corner of their minds. A vision, the world in flames, cities submerged, skies opened, and at the center, the orb, not destroying, judging. Max fell to one knee, vision blurred, memories folding in on each other. Eric stood calm. "This is what comes next," Alex screamed, raising his rifle. Max shouted, "No!" The shot fired. The bullet hit the orb. It detonated in silence. Light exploded in every direction, not burning, but rewiring, and everything went white. The light was not light. It had no source, no heat, no spectrum. It just was everywhere, inside and out, wrapped around the mind like a second skin. Max floated in it, not weightless but unanchored. Time unraveled. The mission, the facility, Alex, Eric, it all frayed at the edges of thought. Then came the sound. Faint, metallic. Not speech, not breath. Memory. A child laughing in the backseat of a car. A rifle chambering around in a desert wind. A whispered goodbye in a concrete stairwell. Max opened his eyes, or thought he did. The world was still white. But now, it moved. Not like a storm or a tide, but like a thought forming just behind the skull. Images appeared, abstract at first, spirals, echoes, pulses, then real, concrete. A corridor, steel walls, flickering light. He stood, boots beneath him, rifle gone, visor cracked, blood, not his, dried along his sleeve. His heart slammed against his ribs. He was back, somewhere, but not the same place, not the lab, not even the same time. The hallway stretched endlessly in both directions. No markings, no sound. Then, from the far end, a figure emerged. Alex, alive, barely. He limped, one arm held tight against his ribs, blood soaking through his side. His eyes locked on Max, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Then Alex collapsed. Max ran, dropped beside him, felt for a pulse. It was there, shallow, thready. "Where?" Alex croaked. "Don't talk," Max said, adrenaline flooding him. "We're getting out." Alex blinked, then managed, "Where's Eric?" Max hesitated. "He's gone." It wasn't a lie, not completely. He hoisted Alex over his shoulder and started moving. Where to? He had no idea. But instinct had kept him alive before. It would again. They passed rooms that shouldn't exist. Classrooms, filled with blank screens and silent desks. Infirmaries, abandoned mid-operation. Quarters with personal effects frozen in time. Coffee mugs half full. Chairs still warm. Something had evacuated in a hurry. Or something had wiped them clean. Max found a stairwell. Manual, rusted, carved into the concrete like an afterthought. He took it, step after punishing step, carrying Alex's weight, ignoring the fire in his legs. Above them, the pulse returned, slow, steady. Every level they climbed, it grew louder. Then a voice echoed from below. Not a shout, a greeting. "Max!" He froze, turned, nothing. Just shadows and empty metal. He climbed faster. 3 levels up, a door, dented, almost fused shut. Max rammed it with his shoulder, once, twice. It burst open, revealing a control center scorched by fire. Screens shattered, consoles ripped out. But the roof was open. Daylight, real daylight, clouded sky, wind, freedom. He dragged Alex out into the air, blinking against the sudden brightness. They were on a rooftop, industrial, wide, lined with old comms towers and blackened vents. Beyond it, mountains. The complex had been buried into the side of a canyon. But what caught Max's breath wasn't the view. It was the crater, where the lab had been, where the orb had floated. Now, a perfect sphere of absence, Not a pit, not rubble, just a hole in reality, like something had erased a chunk of the world and forgot to fill it in. Alex stirred. Max knelt beside him. "You're good," he said, more to himself than to Alex. Alex chuckled weakly. "You always lie like that." Max managed a grin. Then the wind changed, cold, sharp, metallic. He looked up. A silhouette stood at the far edge of the rooftop. Eric, still alive, still changed. His uniform was gone. He wore something now that looked grown, not stitched, a skin of matte black that shimmered faintly. Eyes no longer glowed, they were just empty. But he smiled. "You made it," he said, voice distant, carried on the wind. Max stood. "Tell me what this is." Eric spread his arms. "It's evolution." Behind him, the sky bent, subtly at first, then unmistakably. Clouds warped, folding like paper in invisible hands. "Humanity reached its limit," Eric said. "Wars, nations, control. You were just cogs, Max, good ones, precise, reliable, but still parts of the old machine." Max didn't move. "What's the orb?" he asked. Eric's smile faded. "It's not an orb." Then he pointed to Max's chest. "It's you." The rooftop cracked. A soundless pressure wave knocked Max to his knees. He grabbed Alex, shielding him. Light poured from the crater, not from above but from inside. The hole in the world was waking up. Eric stepped back toward it. "You'll see," he said. Max reached for his sidearm, fired 3 times. Each shot passed through Eric. He didn't flinch, didn't fade, just watched, and stepped backward into the light. Gone. The sky went still. The crater dimmed. Max lowered the gun. Alex stirred. "Tell me I'm dreaming." Max exhaled. "I don't think we sleep anymore." Below, the facility moaned, as if alive, as if angry, as if unfinished. Max looked at the crater, then at the horizon. Something was coming, and they had just witnessed its first breath. The silence that had enveloped the rooftop shattered under the oppressive weight of impending doom. The horizon, once a distant promise of escape and new beginnings, now rippled with disquieting energy, as if the world itself were summoning a reckoning. Max and Alex, still reeling from the surreal encounter, found themselves thrust into a confrontation with forces beyond their understanding. Below, the crater, a gaping void torn in the fabric of reality, continued its slow, inexorable awakening, as if eager to unleash its secret on an unsuspecting world. Max stood on the edge, eyes transfixed by that otherworldly chasm. In its depths, light shimmered not with heat or color but with a cold, clinical brilliance that seemed to rewrite the very laws of nature. Every pulse emanating from the void echoed deep within his bones, a rhythmic reminder that what they had witnessed was no mere aberration, but the precursor to something ancient and fundamental, a rebirth of chaos and order entwined. The facility behind them groaned, as if protesting its own existence, its once familiar corridors now alien, warped by the immeasurable force that had altered the balance of everything. Alex, cradled in pain yet determined, struggled to rise from the rooftop debris. His eyes darted between the void and the shattered remnants of what had been their refuge. "Max," he rasped, voice thick with disbelief and lingering fear. "I've never seen anything like that before. It's as if reality itself is being rewritten." His words were a quiet admission that the foundation of their past, every battle fought, every mission completed, seemed suddenly trivial in the face of an unstoppable metamorphosis. In that moment, the wind shifted, carrying with it a scent of scorched metal and primordial decay, a miasma that hinted at both destruction and creation. Max felt his heartbeat accelerate. He could almost hear the whispers of a million lost voices, echoes of civilizations long perished, reaching out from the dark recesses of time. There was a palpable urgency in that wind, a call to descend further into the unknown. The rooftop, once a symbol of narrow salvation, now served as a threshold to an abyss that promised both revelation and damnation. With no time to squander, Max hoisted Alex onto his shoulder, their shared pain and adrenaline forging an unspoken pact between them. They had to get away, find shelter, a vantage point from which to understand what was unfolding before their eyes. Even as they retreated down a crumbling fire escape, each step resounded like a tolling bell. The facility's structure, scarred by the earlier chaos, trembled under a power beyond human comprehension. Outside, the world beyond the compound was a shifting tableau. The distant mountains appeared to dissolve into swirling mists, and the once clear sky now roiled with unnatural hues of violet and crimson. It was as if nature were marionetted by forces unseen, a macabre dance choreographed by the very fabric of existence. Max's mind raced, attempting to piece together fragments of fractured memory and instinct. He recalled the whispered legends of a time when the earth was young, when ancient energies roamed free and humanity was but a fledgling species struggling against titanic forces. Now, it seemed, those energies had returned, and they were hungry for reclamation. They moved cautiously down a narrow alleyway beside the main complex, where shadows deepened and reality blurred into a surreal melange of light and darkness. The street, littered with remnants of a hurried evacuation, bore silent testimony to lives interrupted. Burned-out vehicles, shattered glass, and scorched pavement whispered secrets of chaos that preceded this moment. Every sense was on high alert. The duo could feel unseen eyes tracking their movement, as if the very ground harbored sentience. Ahead, a door half obscured by debris beckoned, a passageway that might lead them to temporary refuge. Max pushed it open, the hinges emitting a plaintive creak that resonated with the atmosphere of decay. Inside, the corridor was dimly lit by flickering emergency lights that sputtered against peeling walls. There was no warmth here, only the cold geometry of concrete and the subtle hum of residual energy pulsing through corroded pipes overhead. They advanced, their footsteps echoing in the narrow space as memories of previous battles, of stealth and precision, surfaced in their minds. But nothing could have prepared them for what awaited at the corridor's far end. There, framed by a rusted metal door, hung a mural of symbols, an intricate tapestry that wove together imagery of angels, demons, and cryptic hieroglyphs. It was as though ancient scribes had etched a warning for future generations, a message meant for those who dared to glimpse beyond mortal realms. Max's hand trembled as he reached out to trace one of the symbols, a spiral intertwined with a lightning bolt, radiant with an eerie phosphorescence. In that fleeting moment he was flooded with visions, towering spires of a bygone civilization, cataclysmic storms that shattered the skies, and the blurred countenance of a figure that seemed to beckon him forward. It was a call to action, as compelling as it was terrifying, a summons from the void itself. Before Max could decipher its meaning, a low murmur emanated from the depths of the corridor. It wasn't a conversation or even identifiable speech. It was a vibration, a chorus of sound that resonated in the very marrow of his bones. The vibration built slowly, a subsonic rumble that underscored the gravity of what was unfolding. Suddenly, the door burst open, and a group of figures spilled into the corridor. They moved with an unsettling synchronicity, a unit of beings that were neither fully human nor completely other. Their uniforms were tattered remnants of military garb, yet adorned with unfamiliar markings and symbols that glowed faintly against the dim light. Their faces were obscured by masks reminiscent of those used in ancient rites, and their eyes shone with an otherworldly determination. It was as if the very essence of the old world had merged with modern warfare, creating soldiers born of both time and myth. "Identify yourselves," Max barked, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. One of the figures stepped forward, a tall, gaunt man whose eyes burned with fervor, his voice a gravelly whisper that seemed to reverberate inside Max's skull. "We are the custodians," he intoned, "guardians of the threshold. You have trespassed upon the sacred nexus of rebirth. The old order ends here, and a new one shall rise." For a moment, the corridor fell into an uneasy stillness as both sides regarded one another. Alex, still slumped against Max's shoulder, struggled to comprehend the enormity of the declaration. The custodians advanced slowly, their movements ritualistic, their intent inscrutable. Their leader continued, "You, who carry the blood of warriors, the echo of lost legacies, your fate is intertwined with the awakening. Stand aside, and your destiny shall be revealed. Resist, and you shall be consumed by the primordial forces." The words struck Max like an electric shock, a paradoxical blend of promise and peril. Here, in this forsaken corridor, ancient authority and modern desperation converged. The custodians were not mere soldiers. They were emissaries of a prophecy too vast to ignore, a future where humanity would either ascend or be devoured by its own hubris. As the leader's words faded, a palpable tension filled the air. The interplay of light and shadow on the walls grew erratic, as if the very space was trembling beneath the weight of cosmic significance. Max's grip tightened on his sidearm, but his mind churned with conflicting impulses. He could sense that the custodians were not his enemy in the conventional sense, but emissaries of a truth that defied the logic of warfare. Yet survival demanded caution. "What do you want from us?" Max asked, his voice steady, despite the turmoil roiling within him. The custodian leader regarded him with eyes that seemed to pierce the facade of his soul. "We seek those who can bear the burden of transformation. The world you knew is collapsing under its own decay. In its ashes, a seed of new life germinates, a new paradigm for existence. You have been chosen by fate, whether you embrace it or deny it." Before Max could respond, an ear-splitting rumble reverberated from the direction of the crater. The ground trembled as if in warning. Outside the corridor's narrow window, a vast shockwave rippled across the compound, shaking loose dust and debris. The custodians exchanged grave glances. "The awakening has begun," the leader murmured, a mixture of dread and awe coating his tone. In that heartbeat of silence, Max realized that the struggle was no longer a battle for survival in the familiar sense. It was a descent into the very heart of transformation. The barrier between humanity and something ineffable was crumbling. Whether it meant salvation or annihilation was a question that no man alive could answer. Alex's labored breathing pulled Max from his reverie. "Max, what do we do?" he gasped, voice trembling with both physical pain and existential fear. Max looked from Alex to the custodians, and finally to the yawning void beyond the compound. The choices coalesced into a singular, inescapable decision. "We go with them," he said softly, not as surrender, but as acceptance of the path fate had carved out. "We step through the threshold, embrace what lies beyond, and fight for our future, whatever it may be." The custodians inclined their heads in unison, as if sealing a pact forged in the ages. With deliberate resolve, Max and Alex followed the group deeper into the labyrinthine corridors of the facility, where walls whispered forgotten incantations and every step echoed the cadence of destiny. The ancient nexus pulsed all around them, merging past and present into a singular, overwhelming moment. Outside, the crater pulsed in tandem with the heartbeat of the Earth, a living reminder that the balance had shifted irrevocably. As Max's group disappeared into the dark, hallowed depths, the world above braced itself for a transformation that would change everything and challenge every notion of humanity's fragile dominion. And so, in the descent into the abyss, as the custodians led them toward a truth too vast to be confined by words, Max understood with quiet, terrible clarity that the future was written in the language of both destruction and rebirth. The journey ahead would test every fiber of their being, pushing them to confront not only the forces arrayed against them, but the very nature of their souls. The descent took hours, or maybe it took no time at all. In the dark, time stretched and bent like heat mirages across scorched earth. Max, Alex, and the silent procession of custodians moved deeper into the buried veins of the earth, where stone breathed and whispered in languages that predated stars. The further they went, the more the corridors twisted, losing any sense of structure or human design. Geometry turned alien, as if the walls themselves had been sculpted by thought rather than tool. Above them, the world churned. Below, it waited. The passageway narrowed to a throat of obsidian and bone. The walls glistened with moisture and veins of flickering energy, pulsating like arteries of a sleeping god. No one spoke. Even Alex, despite his injury, remained silent. There was reverence in the air, and fear. Not the kind born from battle, but something deeper. A primal awareness that they were walking not through ruins but through a living threshold. Max's thoughts spiraled as they moved. Every step took them further from the world they knew. Rules of engagement, coordinates, command structures. Here, strategy was useless. Guns, weightless. Even memory, unreliable. What had begun as a mission had become something far more complicated. He glanced at Alex, pale, drenched in sweat, his breathing shallow but steady. The fight hadn't left him, but the world had. Finally, they emerged into a cavern that defied scale. The chamber stretched for miles, lit by no visible source, yet bathed in an eerie violet glow. The floor was a web of bridges, like stone spider silk, crisscrossing a bottomless pit. In the center, suspended in a spire of light, was a sphere, not the orb from before. This one was bigger, older, cracked, and still breathing. Every few seconds it pulsed, not with light but presence, like it was thinking, like it was dreaming the world into being. The custodians stopped at the edge of the final bridge. Their leader turned. "This is the route," he said, "the origin and the end." Max stared at it. There was no awe in his face, only calculation, assessment, because deep down he knew what it was. He'd seen it before. In dreams he never remembered. In moments between heartbeats during black ops in Siberia. In deserts where compasses spun like weather vanes. He'd felt its pulse beneath ice fields, heard its hum behind the silence of closed briefings. This was no alien relic. This was Earth's heart. And someone had awoken it. The custodian extended a hand toward the sphere. "This is why Eric returned." He touched the seed. "Now it seeks another bearer." Alex, barely upright, whispered, "Why us?" The custodian turned his gaze to him. "Because you made it this far." A low rumble shook the bridge. Beneath them, shadows shifted, curling like smoke across the abyss. Then, movement. Something stirred in the dark. Not one thing. Many. Max dropped to a knee, instinct taking over. His hand went to his sidearm, though he already knew it wouldn't matter. Whatever dwelled here, whatever waited in this place, wasn't of flesh and blood. From below rose forms. limbs twisted like melted steel, eyes glowing with unreadable emotion. They weren't monsters. They weren't men. They were fragments, pieces of something broken trying to assemble itself again. And they were watching him. Him. Not the custodians. Not Alex, just Max. One of them climbed the side of the bridge and stepped forward. Its body flickered between solid and translucent, as though caught between two frames of reality. When it spoke, the words weren't heard. They arrived like thoughts already halfway formed. "You have touched the fracture," it said. "You are resonance." Max stood tall. "What do you want?" The thing smiled. To finish, then came a second voice, one Max hadn't heard in years. His own, from behind him. He turned and froze. Standing at the opposite end of the bridge was another version of himself. Same build, same scars, same eyes, but colder, unblinking, wearing a black uniform laced with living metal that pulsed with the root's heartbeat. Alex gasped. "Max." The double stepped forward. "I am the consequence," it said. "The version that chose the path you're afraid to follow." Max raised his weapon. "I don't have time for riddles." "You do," the echo said, stepping closer. "Because everything you were is dying, and everything you could be is watching." The root pulsed brighter. Memories flooded Max's mind. Not from his life, but lives that could have been. Him leading armies not of men, but of energy. Him commanding storms. Him burning entire cities to silence the chaos. Power, pure and blinding, and choice. "Rejected," the custodian whispered as if reading Max's thoughts, or become its voice. The echo, Max extended a hand. "You are already half changed," it said. "You felt it in the lab, when the orb rose, when Eric fell." Alex tried to step forward but stumbled. "Don't listen to it, Max. You're still you." But Max wasn't sure. His skin burned at the touch of unseen frequencies. His breath came in waves. His mind buzzed with information he hadn't learned, languages he didn't speak, and at the center of it, Eric's voice, urging him to see beyond, to let go, to evolve. The custodians knelt in a circle. A chant began, low, rhythmic, like ancient code being whispered to the core of the earth. The root glowed in response. Max's doppelganger moved to stand beside it. "There is no war," it said. "No sides, only silence, and those who carry it forward." Max stared into his own eyes and made a choice. He holstered his weapon and stepped forward. Alex screamed, "No!" But it was too late. The bridge lit beneath Max's feet, symbols flaring to life, glyphs older than alphabets, concepts older than language. He walked to the root. It welcomed him. He placed his hand against the cracked surface, and the world fell away. He saw everything. The moment time began, the first choice, the first war, the splitting of dimensions, the birth of humanity as an error in the program, and now, the attempt to correct it. He wasn't Max anymore, not fully. He was resonance, carrier, witness, and gate, then darkness. Darkness wasn't the absence of light, it was memory, crushed into silence. Max floated in that place, not drifting, not falling, but suspended between thought and substance. Around him, there were no stars, no sound, only presence. It pressed against his mind like the weight of entire histories compacted into a single heartbeat. He no longer knew where his skin ended and the root began. They were merging, not through violence, but through understanding. He wasn't being consumed. He was being rewritten. Fragments of consciousness flickered through him. Other selves, other timelines. In one, he was a warlord, crowned in fire. In another, he was a silent observer, walking among broken ruins with eyes that could see the past in stone. Somewhere else, he was a father, a traitor, a savior, a ghost. All of it was true, and all of it was now. He saw Eric again, not the man, but the process. Eric had never died. He had transitioned, from singular to plural, from soldier to symphony. Eric's face emerged from the void, no longer bound to shape or sound, but rippling through Max's thoughts like a tide. "You feel it now," Eric said. Or, maybe the root said, "You understand what we are." Max wanted to speak but had no mouth. He wanted to retreat but had no body. "You came here to complete a mission," Eric continued. "Now you must choose a reality." And Max understood. The root was not a weapon. It was a fulcrum, a decision point for a species on the brink. It had been buried for a reason, not by enemies, by ancestors, to protect the world from itself. But now it had been disturbed, and now the world would be judged. Max felt a pull. Somewhere far below his new awareness, his old body twitched. Alex, still alive, still fighting, still waiting. And Max remembered who he was, who he had been. The root hesitated. For the first time in eons, it listened to conflict, to emotion, to love. And then, light. He blinked. Air rushed back into his lungs like water after drowning. He gasped, flailing, hands, real, his. He was back on the bridge, collapsed, sweating, breathing. Max, still Max. Alex knelt beside him, face pale, eyes wide. Your eyes, they turned white. You stopped breathing. Max gripped his friend's shoulder. "I saw it. I saw everything." Alex pulled him to his feet. "Then we're screwed, aren't we?" Max looked toward the root. But it had changed. Where once stood the great sphere, cracked and eternal, now there was only space, a hollow where silence lived. The custodians were gone. No bodies, no footprints, just wind. And Max knew. The root had made its choice, or perhaps it had deferred it. He had not become its vessel, not yet, but he had touched it, been inside it. And that connection would never break. Alex groaned. "Can we leave now? Or is another cosmic riddle going to eat us alive?" Max almost smiled. Almost. But the echo of the root still hummed in his blood. He could feel it ticking behind his eyes like a countdown. Something had changed. Not just in him, in the world. They ascended. Climbing back through the winding tunnels, past the glyphs that no longer glowed, past the cracks in stone that seemed to seal themselves as they passed. The mountain closed behind them. The ground above was wet, the sky dark with pre-storm air. Thunder rolled across the plain like an omen. And something else. Far in the distance, cities burning. Max saw it first. Smoke spiraling into a sky split by violet lightning. No aircraft, no sirens. Just columns of fire and ash blinking on the horizon like a Morse-coded warning from the future. Alex's voice was hollow. "Oh no," Max said nothing. He understood what had happened. The root wasn't the only one. It never had been. This was only one point of origin, a node. The awakening was global, synchronized, and now it had begun. Eric was just the first. There would be others. Too many to stop. Unless... Max's thoughts locked into place. "We need to find Ross," he said suddenly. Alex turned. "What?" "Our old commander," Max repeated. "If anyone still knows the infrastructure we need, where to go, where they buried the rest of these things, it's him." Alex hesitated. "Last I heard, he vanished after Yemen." Max nodded. "He didn't vanish. He went underground, like all of them, like us, but he left a trail." The trail was a legend, encrypted packets embedded into legacy satellites, only decipherable by someone who'd trained under Ross's direct command. Max had trained with him for 6 years. He could follow it. "We need gear, a connection, a satellite link." Max said, eyes scanning the hills. Then we find Ross, and we finish this before it finishes us. Alex didn't argue, didn't joke. He saw the look in Max's eyes. This wasn't just a continuation of the mission. This was the beginning of a war, not with armies, but with something deeper. The war for the future, for the code, for the choice. They descended the last slope in silence, leaving behind the place that had tried to rewrite them. The wind howled across the empty field, and far above, the clouds spun tighter, as though the sky itself had begun to circle a drain. Somewhere, across the bleeding edge of dawn, new awakenings stirred in other places. New carriers opened their eyes, new echoes took root. And the countdown continued. Dawn broke like a wound across the sky, red, swollen, unnatural. The sun barely breached the clouds before being swallowed by a haze thick with soot and something heavier, something electromagnetic. Max and Alex moved through a ruined valley where once there had been a village. Now, there was nothing but silence and blackened stone, as if something ancient had inhaled the town in a single breath and left only the charred echo of human life behind. Max walked with purpose, a steady urgency in his stride. The visions hadn't left him. The root had gone dormant, but its imprint pulsed in his blood like a drumbeat. He didn't need a compass. The path was inside him now. He knew where to go, even if he didn't know what he'd find. Ross, the old commander, the man who'd made killers out of ghosts and ghosts out of history. Max hadn't seen him in over 5 years, but Ross had left fingerprints, encrypted fragments seated in dead satellite arrays, buried beneath abandoned relay stations, and tattooed in the metadata of obsolete military broadcasts. Max had memorized the cadence. The signal's digital rhythm was like an old friend's voice behind a locked door. They found the first node buried in a forest of antenna towers outside what used to be a military research station. The buildings were overrun. Vines crawling through shattered windows, roots coiling through broken doors. The air smelled of mold, wet iron, and ash. Max pried open the old comm station and powered up the relic system using a field battery he'd salvaged. The interface flickered, blinking green once, then red. Then something else. A message, coordinates, then a single phrase. Eyes open, black sky inbound. Black sky. That name hadn't been spoken aloud in over a decade. Not since the shutdown of Project Horizon, the last known global defense protocol initiated against threats classified as exodimensional. Threats that, according to every public report, had never existed. Alex read the message and muttered, "That's not good." Max agreed. They followed the coordinates northeast, cutting across a dead zone filled with fallen drones and collapsed satellites, their carcasses twisted like metallic skeletons. Whatever had hit the atmosphere hadn't been just a geomagnetic pulse. It had been a purge. "EMP?" Alex asked. Max shook his head. This wasn't natural. Something rewrote the air. The second relay was hidden beneath an old hydropower dam. They had to descend into its flooded core. Flashlights flickering over walls crusted with algae and scorched insulation. Max hacked into the panel while Alex stood watch, rifle raised at shadows that seemed to move on their own. The screen came to life. This time, there was no message, just a voice. Ross's voice, a pre-recorded fragment. If you're hearing this, then the breach is active and the sequence has started. Do not attempt to stop it alone. The root was the first. There are more. We buried them in places the world forgot, under old capitals, inside false mountains, beneath cities that were never marked on maps. We had to. They weren't ready. We weren't ready. But it's waking now, and we don't get a second chance. A pause. Then, Find the last vault. You'll need the echo key. You already carry it. God help us all. The transmission ended. Alex exhaled slowly. He knew all of this. He knew and said nothing. Max didn't respond. His mind raced, piecing together the clues, the route, the echo key, the awakening. He glanced at his own hand, still scarred from the pulse chamber, still trembling with residual energy. The changes were subtle now, but he could feel it. He was the key, whatever that meant. But the vault, the last vault, that was their target. They emerged from the dam into dusk. The sky was wrong again, stars spinning too fast, the moon flickering like a skipped frame. Somewhere deep underground, other roots were waking, other carriers rising from the forgotten corners of the earth. Max could feel them. Not through sight, not through signal, but resonance. Alex was getting weaker. The wound from the facility hadn't healed right. Infection had set in, something inhuman, something more than just blood rot. His veins pulsed faintly with a gray hue. Max had tried every field med technique he knew, nothing worked. That night, Alex woke screaming. Max grabbed him, held him still. "What did you see?" Alex shook his head, eyes wild. A city, floating, burning, and voices. They were asking me questions, not words, just pressure. Max didn't say it, but he'd had the same dream, not just once. Every night since the route. The dreams were not dreams, they were previews. They reached the next node at the edge of an old war zone. Bunkers half buried in sand, trenches filled with rainwater and bones, and deep below, another chamber, sealed, reinforced. This was it, the last vault, Ross's final lockbox. Max cracked the seal and the door hissed open like it hadn't breathed in decades. Inside was a chamber shaped like a spiral, walls lined with crystalline panels, some shattered, some blinking with flickers of code. At the center, a pedestal. Hovering above it, an artifact, not technology, not entirely, it was alive. A sphere, black as obsidian but flickering with light from within, like a star wrapped in shadow. Max stepped forward. The room responded. The walls came to life with data, holograms blooming in midair, showing planetary shifts, energy flows, route signatures across the globe. Every route, every carrier, and then him, Max. Projected in 3 dimensions, glowing faintly. Designated, Echo Class 1. Alex staggered forward, coughing blood now. "What is that?" Max stared at the orb. "It's a control node, for the network." He understood now. The roots weren't separate. They were connected. A single organism with many seeds. And someone, something, was trying to bring them into alignment. That someone had chosen Eric. But now, it wanted Max. He reached for the orb. It pulsed, accepted him. And in that moment, Max's mind fractured, split across 100,000 screens, 1,000,000 data points. He saw the cities from the dreams. He saw the floating spires, the oceans boiling, the skies unraveling, not destruction, reconfiguration. And one truth above all. If the roots align, the world as it is will end, and what replaces it will not be made by man. He ripped his hand back. The orb dimmed. Alex collapsed. Max caught him, shouting his name. The orb flickered one last time. Then it whispered, "One has already turned, one more, and it begins." Max looked down at his friend, who shook in his arms, breath slowing. No, not Alex. He wouldn't lose him too. Not now. He pulled a stim from his pouch. Injected. Prayed. Waited. Then heartbeat, still weak. But there. He sat in the darkness, the orb pulsing faintly beside them. One has turned, one more, and everything changes. Eric had turned. Now the network needed another. And Max knew they were coming for him next. They didn't sleep again. Not because of danger, though danger was everywhere, but because sleep had become irrelevant. Max sat in silence beside the black orb, its rhythmic pulse sinking to something inside him. Time lost structure. The vault seemed to hum with a language only he could hear now. Binary mixed with memory. Syntax made of dreams and nerve endings. Alex lay still, stabilized by a cocktail of old-world stims and Max's unyielding will. His condition hovered at the edge of collapse. Whatever the root had seeded in him, it wasn't killing him. It was remaking him. The vault's data swarmed around Max, projections, alerts, simulations. He saw Earth from above, satellite recon rebuilt through the root's lens. Dozens of awakenings were happening in real time, sites lighting up like stars on a map. Tokyo, Nairobi, Caracas, Istanbul, Perth. Each pulse brought the planet closer to alignment, and in each one, a carrier, some willing, most not. The network had once been dormant, waiting, silent. But now it had tasted activation. It wouldn't go back, not without either completion or destruction. Max stood. He approached the orb again. This time it pulsed brighter. The root inside him responded. He didn't command it. It wasn't an interface. It was a mirror. "You were not chosen because of strength," the orb spoke. "You were chosen because you hesitate." A strange admission. He placed his hand on it. The walls trembled. Every connected root flared with light, displaying other carriers. One was barely 13 years old, somewhere in South America. Another, an old woman who hadn't spoken since childhood. A man in space. A twin pair in a monastery. None of them were soldiers. None of them were Max. "It doesn't want fighters," Max whispered. It wanted gateways, vessels through which the network could evolve. Eric had become that willingly. Or perhaps he never had a choice, but Max had a choice now, and he had one shot to use it. He looked at Alex, still unconscious, still fighting. He turned to the orb. "What happens if I sever the link? The system destabilizes, the network collapses, the roots go dark. Permanently. Unknown. The energy will seek new configurations. Earth may recover, or unravel." He thought of what came next. No wars, no nations, but no will, no choice. The root would overwrite the species, not to destroy it, but to reshape it into something in line. That was the plan, not annihilation, assimilation. And Max, as a carrier, was now the linchpin. The orb spoke again, this time in Eric's voice. "You've seen what comes after. Why fight it?" Max closed his eyes and remembered. The dirt, the blood, the face of a boy he couldn't save. The hands he'd held as life faded. The sound of Alex laughing in a truck in the middle of nowhere. Choice mattered. Flawed, chaotic, brutal. It mattered. He opened his eyes and made the call. He drew the code dagger. Not a weapon, a key. One Ross had left for him. Hidden in the data stream, disguised as a command override. He jammed it into the orb. Everything screamed. Not sound. Reality. The vault cracked. The ground shook. Lights exploded in every direction. The orb resisted, flashing between colors not meant for eyes. Max dropped to one knee, muscles locked in seizure, but he didn't let go. The override executed. Threshold protocol initiated. Echo network interrupted. Root system dormant. The orb pulsed once more, then went still. Everything stopped, the hum, the voices, the signal. Max collapsed. When he woke, the vault was gone. Not destroyed, just gone. He lay on dry soil, under an open sky. Alex beside him, breathing. Alive. The world was quiet, for the first time in days truly quiet. He sat up, his body ached, but it was his. No pulses, no whispers, just the wind. A small fire flickered nearby. Someone had built it. Across the flames sat a man. Max blinked. Ross? Ross looked older, tired, but his eyes were sharp. He nodded once. You shut it down, Ross said. Max nodded. For how long? Ross asked. Max looked toward the distant hills where the sky shimmered slightly, like the route still dreamed, buried deep and unfinished. I don't know, Max admitted. Ross stood. You'll need to stay ahead of it. It'll try again. Maybe not in your lifetime, but eventually. Max helped Alex sit up. We'll be ready, he said. Ross looked at them both. No, they will. He tossed something into the fire, a small chip, old data, no longer needed, then walked away, vanishing into the dark. Max sat back. Alex coughed, smiled. So, apocalypse averted? For now, Max said. They sat in silence for a while, watching the fire. Above them, the stars spun, faster now, or maybe Max just saw them differently. Either way, the world was still here, still theirs, still ours. And somewhere, far beneath the earth, the root dreamed in silence again, waiting, but not watching, not yet. Max leaned back and closed his eyes. Not to sleep. To remember what it meant to be human, and to hold the line just a little longer.